did this, but I looked at all of it in comparison to all the other stuff we've read. And that's the way I approached it.
What a fine idea.
And so I highlighted several things that I thought were applicable to some of the other texts that we looked at.
So you're looking for bombs?
Right.
Yeah,
I'm thinking ahead.
Yeah, she's looking how to do for the final, yeah.
But I liked what, he mentions the assembly line model of schooling, the factory model. He mentions how art education and art educators are so subject to, how they're subject to all this concept of outcomes of assessment because they're so marginalized in education. And so they're subject to all of the psychological things much more probably than just the average run-of-the-mill teacher, because they already know that they're kind of an outlier and they're kind of the first ones cut.
Vulnerable, yeah.
And, they know that they've got to get on this assessment bandwagon, as he says, and so they can legitimize themselves, that they can get the financial support, etc. And so those are a lot of Taubman's ideas that he goes into. But I would
Because
say,
vulnerable populations are more likely to kind of buy in to the demands of the new folks in order to hopefully buy themselves some air, right? Even though at the end of the day, it might not be in their best interest. And that's a great parallel that you found there too, Taubman's stuff. Yeah, that's just it. I mean, I remember 13 years ago when we were talking about this, the big rage in the media was how listening to Mozart makes you smarter.
Oh,
Mozart, play Mozart to your baby.
Yep.
Baby Mozart, all that stuff was
babies.
all the rage.
Yep.
And from one perspective, finally, some good news that supports arts education, right? And some people jumped on that. But the long view is, don't go there. Because if you go there, the first time there's a study out that says, well, actually, maybe Mozart not so much is good for the baby brain, then suddenly your whole justification for being there is gone. Right?
And there was a study that came out that said that.
I bet there was, which is why we're not all doing it anymore, right? So this whole notion of what is it? To take it out of the arts thing, of giving into the temptation not to value something on its own merits, even if those merits are not easily quantified and not easily compared in a neoliberal world that wants to see that, right? The argument goes, we can't do that because ultimately it sells out, just as the teachers found themselves, the seduction of the profession was selling itself out on the grounds that somehow that was going to be good for, give the justification that would scan well, but if it's not a fit for talking about the value of what you're doing, it's just not. Yeah, that's a great insight, good catch.
I saw some Blade Runner too.
Really? Wow.
Okay.
That sounds fun. Oh, let's talk about Blade Runner some more. All right. Wow. What page?
I'll read it first and then we'll decide.
What page? I'm getting my glasses for this. What page is it on?
It says, with an accent, in the process of working with the material, the work itself secures its own voice and helps set direction. The maker is guided and in fact at times surrendered to the demands of the emerging forms.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. No?
Because it's the form itself, the created, determines what the maker does next, right? That's a nice Blade Runner.
It's page 7.
That's terrific.
Page 7? Thank you.
Which actually gets me over to, I mean, the terms that I love from this guy's work that I use all the time because of their explanatory power is this idea as well. This idea of flexible purposing, which I think is connected to what you just brought up, Juanes. Did you find this term? It's in the index a few times, right? It's Dewey in experiences education, apparently, not the art book. What is flexible purposing? How do we define that? Once you define it, you're like, boy, that's a big word for something that's pretty straightforward. What does flexible purposing mean? Did anyone find the definition?
I'm trying to remember how that.
The improvisational side of intelligence as it included arts.
Okay, improvisational ability.
Yeah.
I think of it as, I can't find the exact definition either. Flexible purposing is realizing that the results of the thing you just did kind of inform the next thing you do.
Oh, it says, even to redefine one's aims when better options emerge in the course of one's work.
There we go, right.
Shift
As
direction.
redefining one's
Okay.
aims,
Yeah.
as better options
Yeah.
emerge in the course of one's work. And I think he
Right.
makes a great point that in the arts, well, in the arts as they are ideally practiced, this happens all the time. You begin making a painting of a vase,
And you change.
but it turns into a portrait of Groucho Marx.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're painting a portrait of Groucho Marx, right? You're not trying to shove your mistakes into your original goal, because the arts understand that value develops, right? It's iterative. That's the word we use all the time. It kind of happens in the cycle of another Deweyan thing, of doing something and then undergoing the results of your doing. Imagine the painter in front of the easel, right? Makes a dab with the paint, steps back and regards. What is the effect of that thing I just did on the whole? Okay? I do it, I undergo the effect, and based on that undergoing, I do the next thing. And then I regard it. And of course it happens really quickly, right? Somebody's painting, but that's the process that we're always doing. And that means that if other possibilities emerge that seem more promising, then we change what we think we're doing and we head down that direction. This also accounts for errors in a much more productive way. The arts love mistakes because mistakes often lead to new opportunities, right? So,
And I like that in the beginning, it seems, it's just in chapter 1, I think, it seems like he's saying that the process of drafting is like your own impulse to create, but the process of editing is to refine your message.
gorgeous.
And that you may not even know your message while you're creating.
Isn't that
And I
lovely?
really liked that.
Isn't that nice? Kind of lines up with some of the way we talk about writing in here too, doesn't it? The creative impulse, in a large part, maybe the kind of writing we've been trying to do is getting out of the way of the over undergoing, if you will, right? We do and undergo, but a lot of writers, as we get started, we do and then we undergo really hard and we think it stinks, and so we edit. No, do before you really regard what it's turning into. And then maybe it shapes itself up in the editing process. Right, that's nice. So that's a powerful idea. Yeah, comment?
I liked his discussions about identity, and I can't locate him right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that stuck out to me was that our identity was being consistently recreated as we engage the materials that we're learning. We are re-identifying ourselves constantly through life. I wasn't reading a different book, was
You
it?
know, I think you were in the right one.
Was it this one?
Yeah, I
So-
think, I think you're in the right one, so yes, so yeah.
Well,
We didn't have nothing other good. I don't think it's all
I
right.
don't know, I lost track.
I don't know exactly. I can't find that, but
But I remember.
know
It
you're
was
in the right
good
book.
wherever it was.
You're in the right book. What that makes me really think about is how the arts invite us to consider medium, right? The stuff in which we work determines, well, initially it determines what we can and can't do, right? In the arts, if you work in clay, there are things that the medium of clay lends itself to that the medium of oil paint doesn't lend itself to. Oil paint makes a bad plate, right? But at the same time, media themselves can do things and not do things. If you're working on a wheel, a potter's wheel, one of the first things you learn is how thin can I make it? You know, you can't make it. You've got to have a certain width at the bottom. I mean, there's limits. That's another nice, lovely phrase. Limits and affordances. That's Dewey's phrase that he uses. That every medium has some things that it's excellent at and some things that it's not very good at. And so, in a way, the arts help us see that the process of successfully working anywhere has to do with paying close attention to the medium you have. I think that translates directly to work that we do in a classroom. What do effective teachers do? They figure out what they have at hand, both in terms of kids and their skills and their dispositions and their interests, but also materials, their own interests. And they you have to work with what you've got in a way. But the deeper thing that you've really got me thinking about is how our medium kind of comes around to define us as well, right? To work. I mean, I've like been around master potters, okay, who've worked for decades, and I like to think, and I think I'm pretty dead on, that working in a medium like that, the way that they work for a long time, actually kind of forms a way of being in the world. I really think I can say that. There's a certain kind of deliberateness and attentiveness and sensitivity that I notice in master, and I'm thinking of one I know very well, one I kind of know, two master potters who I have in my life. And I can think that there's a connection between living in a medium and who you are. You know? Does that sound too crazy?
I can apply that to math people, because people who really see the beauty in math see the world very differently than I do. So I
Nice.
can see that.
Nice. Yeah.